The resin can be pricey. A 500 milliliter bottle, in this case, this is clear resin, is about $20. And a 1,000 milliliter bottle is about $40. But, and they actually go up from there. You can find resins that are $100, $200 per liter. But that depends on the use you're using those for. Like $200 a liter resins are things you use for dental fixtures, which is something they're doing. They also have ones that are so strong you could drive a car over them. This, though this is nice and firm for my needs, you know, it's still fairly flexible and it's a little brittle, you know, and that is a trade-off. Yes, Jim. Or sorry, Kelly.
Hey, can you print in one pass through this machine? Can you print two different colors, like a brown with a white something inside it?
Not in one pass.
Okay.
That would be the deposition version, the resin deposition version. You can do that. And again, it's just like a printer. It has to have multiple heads to do that.
Oh, okay. And yours has
Right.
only got one head, so you can
Well,
only
no,
print one color.
this is a completely different process.
Oh, okay.
This is where it's literally dipping into this resin vat. So think of it that way. You have to, there's only one layer there. There's only one level that it's picking up that light from, that's hardening the resin onto our substrate. And so there's only one way to do that. If you go the other route, then yes, you could do that. It has to have multiple heads, but you lose the detail. So you're gonna find that people who are in large scale, people who tend to go for like O or a lot of the #1 or G gauge, they're very fond of their filament deposition machines, whereas liquid machines tend to be people in scalers, Z scalers, even people in TT scale or T scale. Joel.
Yes. What is the largest size part you can make on this particular printer?
That's a great question. 112 millimeters by 200 millimeters, the size of the tray. So, you know, basically we're talking 4 inches by 6 inches, approximately. Now, the thing to know is that we also have the height, and we have about 8 inches there. So if you turn your model, and this has been the hardest thing about learning this for me, I'm really good with two-dimensional graphics. I'm really good at that. I've had to learn how to work in a 3D space, and you learn how to rotate things and get them to fit just so. But with that, you can print some pretty sizable things. I actually printed a face mask that uses makeup pads as the filter using my 3D printer, and it fits my face. So, you know, it's doable, but that is a thing. And also the time. The mask took 14 hours to print. And I printed that at the highest setting, which was 0.08 millimeters. These are all great questions. Anybody else got a question?
I do. I do. This is
Phil.
Let's say that you have a particular car or modifier that you like.
Yeah.
How would you go about duplicating that, and you didn't want to make a mold of it on a 3D printer, or is that doable?
It's absolutely doable. What you're going to have to do is create a 3D model in software, and that's the next step in this. I'm not really going to. I'm going to gladly talk about it today, but I don't want to walk you through that because I don't want to ruin anybody's brain this morning. I use a program called OpenSCAD. It's a free program and lets you create, again, highly detailed materials. but you end up creating a computer program that creates that three-dimensional shape. And then you feed that shape into what's called a slicer program. And then that slicer creates the native format file that you put on the USB stick for this printer. And then that, in turn, is what the machine uses to do its thing.
Kind of a follow-up question to that. Is there something online, some sort of tutorial on how to program software so you can actually do these things for?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because that's how I learned. I did not, when I got this machine, well, when I found out I was getting this machine, my birthday was in February at the end, and my better half told me we were going to go ahead and buy this for me. So I spent the 2 weeks beforehand learning how to use that software. But there are plenty of tutorials and there are plenty of ways to work through it. I recommend OpenSCAD, and the only reason I do is because I find it is the most detailed. It allows me to draw things down to the thousandth of a millimeter, and so I don't have to worry about it not being perfect. There are other programs called SketchUp or Blender that all create 3D graphics that are immensely usable, but I found that they didn't allow for that precision that I wanted.
Now, these are tutorials or these actual software
Those are actual
programs?
software programs.
What is a tutorial you can recommend?
Well, whichever program you go for, like I use the OpenSCAD, they have tutorials available on how to use it. There are tutorial systems for Blender that you can learn how to use it. There are tutorial systems for SketchUp on how to use it. You know, Ray,
Okay.
did you have a question? No, he's just walking around. Did that answer your question, Phil?
Yes, thank you very much.
No problem. Does anybody else have any questions right now while we've got the 3D printer and it's up and hot? As you've probably noticed behind me, you can see that this has been moving up and down, and that's it doing its thing. I wish it were more exciting than that. Does anybody else have a question? Okay. Jim, what do you say? It seems like a good spot to take a break if anybody's got anything to show off. Anybody got Jim and I talked about this. We wanted to not only make this a presentation that was kind of divided into bite-sized pieces, but we also wanted to give other people a chance to talk about other projects maybe they were doing or something they wanted to work on. Does anybody fall in that category right now?
I have something I want to show, but I got to get up and get it. It's not a project, but it's an antique Lionel that I have.
Okay.
May be of interest. So I'm gonna leave
Why
it.
don't
for a
you
moment.
grab that?
If you give me a minute, I'm going to go upstairs and I'll show you the tank car.
Okay, let's go grab it. I guess while we're waiting on them, I'm going to, those of you who were at the San Jack meeting, you saw me ask my terrible questions and show off my absolutely disgusting first hand-laid switch. That, but I was very lucky that I got a nice phone call from Steve Sandifer, and he and I sat and talked. And so he turned me on to these Central Valley ties, if you're not familiar with them, these Central Valley turnout kits, which are just amazing. They let you hand lay turnouts. I'll pull up one here that I've got open. Central Valley does a couple of things here. Number one, they give you a set of ties that are highly detailed. You got all the plates on them and everything. And they have a channel to, sorry, my shaky hand. They have a channel there for you to actually lay your rails into. They also provide, as part of it, a set of pre-cut points or prefabricated points. You have to trim them up yourself, and a plastic frog that you put your own rail into. So you could actually build these turnouts without using, without having to solder. In fact, they're much more interested in you gluing these down using barge cement. And then they also provide all the detail parts. The throw here, the throw bar for this turnout is built like an actual turnout throw bar. And the hand throw actually works. So the aspect flips and changes. You may have already known about them. It was a new thing for me to learn about, but I'm going to try my hand at doing a good deal of handling on a little 16-inch by 6-foot project under the advice of Steve Sandifer. So we'll see how that works out. And it looks like Kelly's back for some show and tell. Fine, Kelly Russell. Here you are. Kelly, we're going to spotlight you real quick. Can you hear us, Kelly? Kelly, we're going to unmute you. Oh, sorry. There you are, Kelly. Kelly, we should be able to all see you right now, focused on you.
There, now you can hear me.
Yes.
And there's my tank car.
Looks nice.
There's all 4 domes and all 80 decals.
Kelly,
God.
Kelly, can you point out the parts that were 3D printed?
I can show you the one part that JC did print for me. Yes. See if I can get in real tight on it. Right there. It's kind of fuzzy. This part right here is the multi-housing cover. And it actually fits on a flange that looks kind of like a hatch cover, but it's really just a flange. And it's just a little round domed cover, and there's a handle right there. You can barely see that you can almost see it, but there's 4 of those. Not only that, there's a decal on each one of those that says use your 2% outage. So that's the new 4-dome tank car. And the other thing I'm working on is, might as well show you while I'm here. This is a frame for Bill Wright. You know the Speedy car that Dave Schaefer has, the poultry car. Well, this is my version of Speedy, the poultry car. And I've started working on the plywood sheeting inside the reefer section. And I got to thinking, I've put all these really cool studs in the walls that nobody's ever going to see because it's going to be covered up with sheeting and outside. So it's just one of those things. I know it's there.
Right.
The floor is hand laid wood, pieces of wood. The frame is all pieces of styrene, and you'll note the brake system on there as well. So that's the next car in my scratch build set.
Yeah, Kelly, you're going to have to remember to get me those full measurements for those.
I do
coops.
remember that, and I was thinking about that last night. Here's the box. They're 6 high and 8 wide. How about that?
Okay, I will try 6 inches high and 8 inches wide and 28 inches long.
So that's something like that. So we'll let me get you good measurements now that I've got the box where they're going to go into.
Okay.
But thank you for helping out with this.
No problem. Does anybody else who was, I think Phil, did you have
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a project. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can everybody hear Phil?
Yes, I can hear him.
But this, if everybody can see it, is
I'm pulling
a,
you up. I'm
all right.
I'm going to turn you into the spotlight.
all right.
There you are.
Okay,
There we go.
this is a vintage 1927 Lionel locomotive, and it looks like it is a 242. It does not have a road name on it. Instead, it's got Lionel lines on it. Now, this is my father-in-law who's passed away 20 years ago, but apparently he received this as a gift when he was 7, and he was born in 1920. So what has happened here, if you look at this thing, it's all brass on top. Everything is
Phil,
brass
can you
all
hear
over.
me real quick?
Yeah.
Phil,
I'm
lift it
sorry.
up a little higher. We can't.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
now we can see it.
Okay, yeah, you won't see my handsome face, but that's okay. So all of this stuff is apparently brass. I can't see what I'm pointing to. And this sat in a box apparently for about 70 years and had not been, and we took it over to Papa Ben's, put it on the track and fired up immediately. So it's amazing the quality that these things were built with. And this is just heavy as it can be. It's very heavy. And because it's all just solid steel in there apparently. And you know, it looks like we have an aluminum wheels or steel on some of it. But also it came with the tender. And the tender had some, can everybody see that?
Yes.
The tender had some faux coal in it, but you can even see the detail on the rivets and, you know, on the trucks themselves. So almost 100 years old, but still runs. And I'm not a collector. It's not something I know a lot about, but I thought this was an interesting thing to share with everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have something I'd like to show.
Okay, give me a sec there, Dale. Dale, was that you who had something to show?
Oh, it's Dennis Gregerson.
Oh, sorry, Dennis. Let me grab you and let me spotlight you. There you go.
I came into this meeting a little late, so I don't know how the beginning was, but I'm doing a bunch of 3D printing, and this is a okay. Anyway, this is a little passenger car O scale, which I built for my Lionel layout, but it is O scale. It is all 3D printing. I have 3 Ender 3 3D printers.
Okay.
And then I want to show you, this was basically a design I found on a website called thingiverse.com. And I was able to take this car and then modify it with a program called Tinkercad. And I made it into a combine like this, still O scale with dummy knuckle couplers that were coupled with Lionel. And then I went a little further, thinking of our friend Bob Wary, and I reduced the size of the file in Tinkercad to S scale and created this little guy here. It's the same car with the just a matter of punching a couple of buttons on the initial plan for the O scale one, and it drops it down to a 1/64. That's what I'm playing with right now.
Okay. So you said
Here's real quick. These are my 3D printers right here. I have 3 units setting up right here.
okay.
It's a hobby in it. It's a hobby in itself that I've discovered.
Dennis, can you hear me? We can't hear you, buddy. I had a question for you. So you're using the resin deposition version, which is something where the questions were asked. Do you find that there's a trade-off in the amount of detail you get? How fine a detail can you pull off?
With the unit I'm using these are relatively inexpensive machines, and I can get pretty good detail. I did a few things for Chuck Lynn for his ON3 layout, and some underbody braking and stuff, but I get pretty good detail. I can get nut bolt washer casting, or detail on things down to for sure to O scale.
Right.
Once we drop a little lower than that, then you start getting things that it's not going to show real well. I would not suggest using something like this for a bunch of HO or HON3 unless it's a more of a quartz type model.
Right, and that's where we get to. You were asking about what I'm presenting on today is I actually have the other model. I have the liquid deposition.
Right.
The liquid the resin lithography.
Yeah.
So that's what I've got going right now, and then we've got a 2D printer.
Well, I sure didn't want to butt in on your show.
No, it's all right. In fact, I think I've seen you post some stuff on. Are you a member of the 3D printing group on Facebook?
I belong to about 6 different 3D printing things on Facebook.
Okay, I think I've seen your stuff. That's why I'm interested to see that. Does anybody else have something they want to show? Let's see.
Yes.
Joel, what do you got?
Well, I'm new to the Houston area, so this is really the first thing I kind of showed up and moved out of DC. But I'm a member of the NMRA, American Civil War Railroad Historical SIG, and I'd like to show the train I'm working on right now. I'm just to turn around and pick it up, which is, I just did a dumb thing.
Yep, we just lost your video. Sorry, buddy. There we go.
Yeah, my thumb hit the wrong spot. And these first 3 cars up here are 3D prints, and my wife's helping me right here. These are the SIG members, Eric Cox, made these, and I'll turn these sideways. So these are reproduction B&O 1856 box cars. First one right here, you can see how much weight I stick inside those. The other 2 are modernized for the U.S. military railroad. And then this car right here is Marshall Thompson Republic Loco Works wood kit with Eric Cox's U.S. military railroad trucks. So I've kind of exhausted Eric's stuff. He's finished doing the stuff he's interested in. So this show has proven very interesting because there are quite a few things I'd like to start working on. And it sounds like your rosin lithography is better for my scale.
Yeah.
Than the other version. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Like I said, we just want to get people. We want to just sort of present the ideas. I am no master of anything. I like the technology and I like demystifying things. I hope that's a clarity thing. I teach orchestra, and the thing that drives me the craziest that I hear is people say, "Oh, I wish I could do that if only I were talented enough." And the reality is anybody could do that. That was you, and you just put your hand. Will lower your hand. There you go. Anybody else?
Hey, Jay.
Yes, Jim.
Yeah, this is Jeff. Since we're on the topic of Civil War, as you know, I have a bit of an interest in that area as well. Well, something much simpler, but it's kept me busy during these COVID days. I've been bidding on and buying a lot of, or a number of old 1860s type cars on eBay and fixing them up. One of the things that, so speaking of USMRR, here's a USMRR box car. And if you notice what I've done here is I've installed the prototypical 1860s pin and link couplers on them. You can get these from Prescott Hobbies. Invariably, when you get these things for the prices that I'm paying for them on the internet, all the brake wheels are broken off. Sometimes the trucks are non-functional, and so I've had to do a lot of work on them. And of course, I've been detailing the trucks as well. This is an interesting car here. It's a water tank car that bought and modified. Did some dry brushing on the bands. You see it's got the prototypical pen and link coupler on there. And if you notice the top here, so this is something I work with Cliff Cheeseman on. If you're familiar, if you've been to Cliff's house, you know that he diligently works on water tanks. And so he makes these water tanks out of pill bottles. But he did use the same kind of technique to generate these 3 different levels of water in these water tanks. So some of the things that I'm working on, as well as putting in steam sound decoders into my 440 locomotives. Oh, one more thing to show is, I guess, whenever I'm scouring the internet for something Civil War related in terms of railroad, if I see a car with as you're aware, back there were many railroads. So this one, here's a Manassas Gap car. If I see anything like this, I gobble it up because those things are just hard to find. Here's a Savannah, Albany, and Gulf. So, and I've got some other ones here that are Atlanta and West Point as well. So anyway, if I see those things, I gobble them up for a future Civil War layout, but that's way down the road.
Right. Well, I think we're all in that where we're trying to figure out what we're doing.
But I guess to tie this in, though, is that as I've talked to you today, I eventually want to be able to build box cars. I've got a book here that has the dimensions for both flat cars, box cars, and house and what they call the horse cars or house cars.
Yeah.
All the cars then started out as a flat car essentially, and they just build up the size as necessary to create the various functional pieces.
Okay. So I'm gonna, if anybody else, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. We're gonna have a little second break after I present this next section. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to my second machine here. And this is my Cricut. You've probably seen these. These have been around much longer. They're available at any of the craft stores, Joann's, Michael's. I'm sure Hobby Lobby sells them. And they're a 2D cutting machine. And they are both easier to use and at the same time more, more trouble in creating the detail pieces, I guess. The way I like to tell people you need to focus on when you're using the 2D cutter is that the 2D cutter allows you to, can you hear me clearly? I'm going to mute everybody because we've got a little background. I'm going to mute everybody there for just a sec. There we go. Sorry, I'm so ADD when it comes to background noise. So what we see here is that we need two-dimensional plans to create our own kits. And so I'm going to show you one little piece of software here because it's going to set us up for how we manage what we're about to do. And we're going to cut a structure kit. I saw he was here earlier. Yep, there he is. Jeff's going to be happy because this is an L&N depot that was in Pascagoula for quite a while that we're gonna cut. But I'm going to share my screen if everybody can see. There we go. This is what's called Cricut Design Space. And in Cricut Design Space, this is their proprietary software that you have to use in order to lay anything out to be cut. And so you're going to notice here that I have a bunch of different things I've set up. For those of you who did the Ortner car kit, well, there's actually one here and one there, and there's the N-scale version, the S-scale version, the O-scale version. This is a little building that I originally built. This is probably my first little structure that I did. In fact, it's sitting here on my better half's desk. I didn't even realize that. But these are all things that you can build, and these are all files that I've created for things that you can build. And so I'm going to pull up one real quick here, this LNN Depot, and I'm going to kind of show you what's there so you can understand why it's laid out the way it is. So I'm going to go ahead, I pulled it up and I'm going to tell it to customize it. So in this case, what you see is I have a section here to cut out that will create for me siding, appropriate siding. This is 12-inch spaced vertical siding. And then this next piece is 6-inch horizontal siding. It'll scribe my styrene for that. You're then going to notice down here that I've got parts that are black, and I got parts that are they're magenta and cyan. The black parts are all going to be cut from basic styrene stock, 12 by 24 inch sheets of 0.030 styrene. And then we're going to go back and cut the magenta parts out of what we created here to begin with, and the cyan parts out of this, so that way we end up with the proper sidings for the building. Now I created these files in Adobe Illustrator, and that is my my program of choice to create what you need for this. But I have it set up that way. I'm going to unmute real quick to see if anybody had any questions on anything I just said. Anybody got any questions? Okay, then I'm just going to go ahead and move on. Back to my screen share here. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I go to this, when I get to this window, I come over here and I click make it. And then the machine will divide this by color. That's why I colorized what I did. So you're going to see there's a cyan mat here. That's going to be one sheet. There's the magenta mat. That's going to be another sheet. And then down here, I've got the black mat. And you're going to notice that it has two separate pieces because it thinks it needs to do 12-inch by 12-inch. I'm actually going to set this where it prints or cuts on 12-inch by 24-inch. So it all fits on one. By the way, you're going to notice here that I've got these little black lines there. That's actually going to work in the pen so that it's going to draw what I need to put the lines to make sure that when I put shingles on, that they end up being as clean as I need. So in this case, I know that this file works. I know it's what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue. And I had it on that black mat first, which is what I want to cut. So then it's going to ask me here, what material do I want to cut? And this is one of those weird things about this. On the machine, there's a dial over here that says settings. And wherever I dial that to on my program, changes what that says. In this case, I'm going to set it to poster board plus. Okay, and then you're going to notice here the next place down it says load black pen in clamp A, load fine point clamp in pen B, and then load mat. I'm going to pull you out of screen share mode so you can then see how I do that. In here I have a section of pens. This is my fine point pen. I'm going to make sure that I got ink on it today. And so I come in and I pop it into the machine here. I close that in. On the B side, we have this that has a very fine little blade. And it controls that in this clamp. So all that's left for me now is to decide which of these mats I want to use. Let's use one that's not that one. Yep, that one it is. So I have a 12-inch by 24-inch mat here. And it says strong grip, which means it'll hold styrene. So I take that. I order my styrene from a company in Richardson called E Street Plastics. Let me make sure before I go too much further here that I'm grabbing a sheet of 0.030 styrene. Nothing like grabbing the wrong thickness. Yep, that's it. And I'm going to take this sheet and I'm just going to line it up on the grid on this sheet. Make sure that you get it as far up there. You want to really make sure you line up with the grid, because if you don't, anything you have that sort of cuts on the edge will get cut off. The machine is merciless when it comes to that. So I make sure it lines up, and then I make sure to press it as flat as possible. Actually do the belly rub. I know the technical term here for what I'm doing. And then once I've got it set, again, it lines up with the grid on the mat. I come over to the machine and I insert it in. And then there are 3 buttons here. There's the flashing button you see right now. When I press that button, it will load in this sheet. The next thing is going to be this flashing blue button here. When I press that, it will start the project. So I pressed it, and you're going to notice here, first thing it's going to do is it's going to draw those lines. Now, where it draws these lines is going to be on the piece I want when it cuts out. So rather than having to figure out where I'm going to place my, what did we just do? Looks like we had a little issue there for a second, but it's straightened out now. And the reason that's so important to me is because this morning I used my machine and I cut out some, it's actually very hard for you to see that, isn't it? These are shingles. I'm gonna go ahead and set you up here. This is a light grip mat, so it's designed to hold paper. But when I pull, it's not gonna give me all of them. It's not gonna, it'll make me work for a couple of them. But generally, when I pull up and pull out, it leaves me with HO scale-ish. Pull one down here. These end up being HO scale shingles. And because I do it this way, I can cut it on whatever paper I want. So to give you an example, this is a little building. This is the first little building I built.
Spring Creek in Minnesota?
I think it's Iowa, I think. What is that?
Oh.
Iowa, Minnesota.
Right.
I'm catching him. I'm muting him. Oh, he muted himself. Okay. So this building, I actually laid those shingles the way of what I've done just now, and you know, did a pretty terrible job, but that was my first one. So this is also the point at which I realized that I was going to have to go to 3D printing the window details instead of just doing them this way. But as you can see on the side of this, that siding was something I scribed using the machine, rather than paying to get evergreen styrene, to giving them the privilege of making my siding for, what is it, $19 a piece. I ended up paying $1.50 for my sheets of styrene that I then get to use for what I'm doing here. So I'm gonna open back up. I'm gonna unmute everybody.
Things now, we're gonna.
So other than Ray, who I'm gonna mute back, does anybody have any questions? No questions about the funny machine?
see, how thick can you cut?
I can cut into .060. I mean, as with any of this, to cut completely through, I can cut through .020. In this case, I'm gonna have to snap out a little bit, but it's, you know, I can cut through, you can honestly cut into anything you wanted. The machine would not take .100. That would be a strain on the wheels, but I've gotten .060 under there.
I had a question. What's the cost of this machine? And also, is it best for cutting siding on the 2D of a structure, or do you even go to 3D on that? Which works better?
For the siding, I use this exclusively.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you know, the more I do this, the more I am becoming hyper vigilant about details.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, the offset for siding, unless it's beadboard, you know, the offset for siding is 1/4 of an inch. So think about that, 1/4 of an inch in HO scale, which is what I work in. You're talking down to 1/1000th of an inch. Now, could you see that difference? Sure, you could. But is it worth the trouble of producing that on my 3D printer? And at this point, I can't say it is. That opinion may change in a year, but not right now.
Let's say you had a building that had 20 windows on it, and it was 5 stories, and each story had 4 windows. You would need to use the 3D to print that siding, or can that be done on the 2D?
What I would do, and what I do here, is I create the walls using the 2D cutter here, and then I create the windows using the 3D printer.
I see.
Yeah. Now, brick pattern is something the 2D printer has issues with. So I haven't figured out a good workaround to get the brick pattern to work yet. But I think part of that is that the software they make us use for this, because it has to be their proprietary design space software, it has had trouble managing that. And I think in the future, when we get somebody who's finally going to be like, okay, enough of this, let's use our own software and figure out how to write code for this machine, I think we'll find that it'll handle much bigger numbers. You know, as is always the case with anything that handles software, it's going to be how much memory have they committed to how it works. In this case, I can tell you that it's not very much memory. I will also tell you that, you know, working with things this past week, I've had trouble myself. My Macintosh that I have been with for almost 10 years now decided to go to that great apple orchard in the sky last Saturday. And I've been working on my better half's laptop, which is a PC. And when creating some 3D files this week, I managed to crash it several times. And I know the things that my Mac wouldn't have had trouble with, but I also know that this laptop is meant purely for, we bought it just for work. We didn't buy it for, you know, anything fancy, whereas my Macs are always something we buy with the idea of working in 2D and video graphic. So good questions. Anybody else got a question? Nobody else. Okay. So I'm going to let this, it is working, as you can see. Now it's starting to cut the scribe pattern. You see, I don't know how well you can you see that scribe very well? Not really. This is one of those points I wish I had 3 hands. See what I can knock off the wall. Flashlight. Does that help you better see the scribe lines in there?
A little
Not
bit.
really. A little bit, yeah. It's cutting the 6-inch scribe material, and that's what it's cutting right now. So it's, you know, it's fairly quick. They're both they both have their pros and they both have their cons. At this point, we have.
How long does a blade last?
Depends on how much abuse I've given it. I mean, I just changed out the blade this morning, and the last blade cuts perfectly fine, but it was beginning to drag a little bit. So I was going to cut paper, so I wanted to be extra clean. So that last blade had lasted probably 6-7 months. On the other hand, when I was cutting 20 to 30 sheets of stuff a day, I've gone through a blade in a week. You know, it really depends on how much I'm using it and also who all's doing the cutting, because when I've entrusted students to do the cutting, they are a little less delicate with it than I would be. I think the big thing with it is just knowing how to use the software, and that's the challenge with the 2D cutting. Again, oh, yay. One of the things I like to point out is that the cutter, while it is good, it can only get down to about 5/1000ths of an inch. That's the limit of its precision. After about 5/1000ths of an inch, it starts falling back into its own grooves and causing issues, which is why the gaps in between the gaps here are wider than I would really like. I'd really prefer it just run up, run down. But I had to put that gap there the way I did so that it would provide you know, something that looked like an actual shingle. Any other questions? Okay, on
Have you attempted anything like fire escape detail or like radio comm towers or anything like that for 3D printing?
For the 3D printing, I mean, I have seen them. I have not done that yet. The thing to understand with me is that at this point, I don't have my own layout. I'm just creating, up until very recently, content for my students. And then the last 2 months that you would think would have been great for me to just do my own thing have been learning how to use this sort of software, Zoom and Microsoft Teams. With teacher turn-in the next week, I get to start diving off and creating things for myself. My next project is a Kansas City Southern Yard Slug. And I've got most of it created in the program. That's why I needed the AAR trucks, is because I want this slug to be hyper realistic. And so with this, I can. At the same time, I'm gonna throw that away, it's good. At the same time, I have to realize I just don't get to everything I want to, you know what I mean? And I think that is one of the problems I think we all have, is that we have more projects that we want to do than we get to do. Actually, if there aren't any, I have a question for everybody. So here's my question, and I would like everybody to answer if you could, or you feel like it. What would be one project you wish you could do right now? Sort of a dream project, just one. I want you to think about that for a second and then answer in as you feel ready.
I've got one. I modeled Louisiana sugarcane railroads, and there is a large mill that no longer exists, but it was at Homa's house. I can't project it on the screen here, over in southern Louisiana. but it is a huge mill with a lot of detail to it, and smokestacks and the whole 9 yards. So while you have been showing us this, I've been thinking, how could I utilize 3D printing and 2D printing to accomplish that? Because no kit exists, and to scratch build it from just styrene, I don't have enough pictures to really get the details that I want.
Right.
But that was kind of something I was thinking about.
Well, Phil, I think the thing to understand there is, you can only do as well as you can, and that's a hard lesson I think we all have to deal with. But the other catch is there's some pretty, I am loath to say go back to school a little bit here, but I think you'll find if you renew your knowledge of geometry, you could do some pretty basic math. I'm not even talking trig, to calculate sizes and such to get what you want, and then just add details as you go.
Math was never my strong suit. I was always in the arts.
You're not alone. Hey, I teach orchestra and choir in high school. When I wasn't doing those two things or playing pipe organ, I was a photographer. So I understand that, but I think it's detail as we're able. I think one of the things we got to remember is this has got to be enjoyable, and we don't drive ourselves any crazier than absolutely necessary doing all this.
The other question, does your cat normally sit still while you're doing all of this?
Oh yeah, is she? Yep, she's back there. She is the most, our vet says she's the most chill cat on the face of the planet. We take her in to the vet. The only thing that freaks her out is putting her in her kennel.
Yeah,
and
same thing here with ours.
So we don't anymore. I just put her on my shoulder and get her in the truck, and then in the truck she's walking over the dashboard, looking at the world. People in the other cars are like, wait, did I have a stroke, or is that guy like got a cat in the car? And then we get to the vet. I just walk her inside, lay her on the counter. She just lays out. Dr. Romeo comes in to take blood, and they pull a leg out, and they're like, do you want to hold her? I'm like, I can, but and pull out the leg, take the blood, and she's just like, oh, okay. So yeah, no, she just does her thing.
That's great.
Don, what's your project that you would do? What's your pie in the sky?
Right now, what I'm working on is a water tank in the 120 to 0.3 scale. So it's large scale. I've cut all the wood myself on my saw. And I've got a Burns model maker saw, which is ultra high precision. And also have the Burns thickness sander, which Scott had some interest in and everything, and I need to get back in contact with him to work on some shingles for model making.
Don Hand, what is your project? What would be your project if you had all the time in the world? I guess I can't hear him. Let's see, who else are we going to tag here? Let's go for Jeff. Jeff Fowler, what would be your project?
Not really sure at this point. Lots of possibilities, but I haven't really got a specific project right now.
Greg, you're sitting right next to him, so you get called next. Greg, what's your project that you would do if you had all the time, or what's your ideal project right now?
Me?
Yes, Greg.
Oh, okay. Well, probably a kit I have for building a petrochemical plant. I have a refinery and I want to expand that, but I don't have the bench work for that part of the layout done yet, and that's down the road, so it'll be a while.
Is it a specific refinery you're trying to reproduce, or is it just?
No, I don't have a specific railroad or location or date, just putting together my first layout.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know, that's how it works. I'll let other people volunteer here. I'm checking the cutter is getting fairly far along here. Sorry, that is one of the things I have to watch out for with the cutter is that because it's a 24-inch mat, you have to keep an eye on it. It will dislodge itself from under its wheels. And if you do that, then you'll end up with cuts that are a little wonky. It's not foolproof, but it's a good tool. I think that's what the question came up earlier about AP judging. And that's what people have been telling me is that when you've got these items, they don't preclude you from using them. You just have to understand that it's another tool. And so if you use the tool well, then you do very well. And if you don't, then you don't. Let's see, somebody we haven't heard from. Randall. Randall, can you hear me? Sorry, went a little mental with the intel there. And Randall's clearly not on his mic. Scott.
Yes.
What's your project at the moment?
I can tell you what I'm working on right now.
Okay.
This is Tower 17 out in Rosenberg.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my questions was, how would you import this into the Cricut to cut the siding and stuff? I have basically been making it with, you know, the regular siding that you would get.
Yeah.
I got to figure out how I'm going to show you this.
We can see it well enough. If I was going to do that, the first thing I'd do is, you know, I would design down the sides. The thing to understand about any of the sidings is we don't usually custom lay every single siding board to be a different size. You know what I mean? There's a reason we do siding is because it's all standard. You know what I mean? Does that make sense, Scott?
No.
Okay. So when you put siding together on the side of a house or inside of a building, it's 4-inch siding or 2-inch beadboard, right? Or do you understand what I'm saying?
You know, like just the 6-inch horizontal siding.
Right. It's 6 inches. It's not, you know, it's not that we have one board that's 2 inches and the next board's 14 inches so I would start by creating that pattern like we've done here.
Yeah.
Like what it's cutting out now.
You know, like I said, this drawing, yeah, basically is to scale in AutoCAD.
Right.
And then I printed it up at HO scale.
Right.
How would I import something like that into the Cricut cutter?
Okay, so a couple of options. If you could export it as an SVG file, or
my AutoCAD does not do that.
Okay, or a DXF file.
I can do a DXF.
Okay. The other thing you're going to have to do is remember that you're going to simplify it down to only the walls. You're not going to need if you're going to 2D cut on the Cricut, you don't want to cut the roof at the same time. Because
I can basically separate the walls out in the individual pieces.
Right. So
to have it cut on the Cricut, you know, other projects, I guess.
Right. So what I do is I cut the siding first on just blank sheet of plastic. And then I have my walls set out in the file. And so then I cut those walls onto that siding pattern. Does that make sense, or do you understand what I'm saying? We're actually going to see an example here shortly. As soon as it gets, I'm going to pop here real quick and see we're 70% of the way done with this first cut. The rest will come back fairly quickly. But what we'll do is we'll separate out the pieces that have already got the pattern for the siding cut in them. And then I just put it back in for a second pass. Does that make sense, Scott, or did that help?
Yeah. Like I said, my question is, well, like these, I don't know what you call it, kind of this fish scale siding.
Yeah. Oh, the fish scale siding.
Can it do those little circles?
Not thus far.
Okay.
I would 3D print that. That I would use Phil was asking about a something that I would 3D print the siding on, and the fish scale would be one of those.
Okay, even though it's on that wall, you print it as a separate item.
Right, print it as a separate item, because if you think about when you see those buildings in real life, those fish scales stand out against that building.
Yes.
They're not the same relief as the wall. So I would create the wall with this. I would cut the wall with the. I'd probably go ahead and cut the whole wall with the. Sorry, I'm talking and you're like. I would cut the whole wall with the regular vertical siding, and then I would 3D print those fish scales with very low relief, say, 1/10 of a millimeter, and then I would place them on top of that where they belong. That's how I would do that.
Okay.
And now at that point, then you created these in CAD. Can you export those fish scale sections and emboss them? Actually, I know you can. You can import them into OpenSCAD, and there's a setting that says 2D extrude, and it'll extrude any 2D shape into a 3D shape. So then once you set that extrusion, you could do it as a difference mat against a piece of like a rectangle that was, again, like 1/10 of a millimeter. And then that would create that fish scale that you wanted. I don't know the CAD software you're using. So again, I'm hobbled there.
I'm using an old version of AutoCAD.
Okay. And I again, I'm learning my CAD software right now. But that would be my approach to it. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. I'm kind of new in all this subject.
Right.
Don had asked a question or said something about shingles.
Yeah.
What was the question, or what was I supposed to acknowledge or something?
Scott, you had said before that you wanted to take a look at, you had some of the cigar cedar.
Yeah, cigar liners. Yeah.
Yeah. And contact me offline later. Okay. I've lost your email.
Okay.
And on the fishtail shingles, maybe laser cutter might be the way to look at that.
Yeah, I'm going to say that that's my third machine. When I have these two, and I'm going to make what I got work at the moment, but there is a day very clearly in the future when I'm going to get a laser cutter. They're just, right now we're doing good that I've got room for this. So, who else has got a project here? Well, we are 92% of the way through cutting this, and these are the big pieces left. So, fortunately, it's going pretty quick. I apologize for it being. I try to keep it from being too jargony, but at the same time, I'm trying to keep it interesting. I will show you what we've got thus far. Can you see everybody? There's the window cut out. It keeps moving on me because it's feeding in and out. That's a wall with the windows cut. This is that siding that we're going to use here in just a sec to cut the additional pieces. And then those are those the lines drawn, but also the cuts put in for the roof, for a roof line. As for the 3D printer, it is running a little slower this morning than it normally does. That is one of the downsides, is that the 3D printer, depending on the resin and the temperature, will sometimes run a little slower and sometimes run a little faster. So when you run it through the slicing software, it'll tell you how long it thinks it's going to take to cut, or how long it's going to take to print. And sometimes those prints are very accurate to that. Like in this case, this was supposed to be a 1 hour print, but it looks like that's turning more into a 2 hour print. So I'm going to fall back on some pieces to show you. Oh, and the 2D cutter is done. So as we were talking, this is scored. And all my pieces here. So as I show you, there's my roof line. The shingles are already cut out. And now I'm just folding along the score line. I do have to watch out for my fingers here. And that provides me with a part that not only is the right perfect size for my roof line, but also gives me lines to line up when I put my shingles on, which is a very clever thing, I think. But now we get down here. Here are these two pieces, what's left here. I will snap this out while the next sections are going. This is my 6-inch siding, and this is my, or sorry, that's my 12-inch siding. Here's my 6-inch siding. And as they're going, I now have the piece I need to cut that 6-inch siding. You'll notice it does tend to bow a little when you score it. And that is a challenge that pops up. So we make sure that we've got a good mat that's got a nice strong grip. It's one of the reasons why I started using the strong grip mat, because I found that the light grip or the regular grip mat would not hold it appropriately. So I'm gonna snap that one out real quick. And then I'm gonna snap the other one out real quick. And I'm gonna pull up for you guys. I'm gonna share my screen. Here's a Cricut. I'm gonna go back to that, share that screen. So now you notice it's asking me to print this turquoise board, the cyan board. And this is the upper side. So in this case, we want that 6-inch siding. So I'm gonna stop sharing. So now I'm gonna take that 6-inch siding piece, and I'm again gonna line up with this grid. And I'm just gonna press it on, make sure it's down well. And then I just load it back in the machine, and the machine automatically knows what it needs to cut. Now I just did something dumb. I lined up against this corner and not this corner, because when I cut this piece of siding out, I had to take off 1/4 of an inch on each side. So now I'm a 1/2 inch short. Now I know the file doesn't need that 1/2 inch, but I know that I need it for what I'm doing. Or it doesn't need that 1/2 inch on the left-hand side, right-hand side. Sorry, I'm left-handed, so I always get that wrong. So I don't mind it being too far over there, that being open, but I do need it to line up in this corner. Stick it back to the machine. I press the arrow, it loads in, and then I tell it to cut again. And now it's going to cut out those pieces so that I can overlay them on For instance, I'm snapping out a piece here. This is one of the sidewalls for this building. Now you notice the windows in here. This is one of the little hard things about using this. You have to be very gentle. You have to just apply a little pressure underneath and then turn around and apply a little pressure underneath and then come up top and apply pressure there. And then that allows it to pop out and gives you a nice square hole. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Get gentle. This is the place when I give these kits to the students where they make the biggest mistake, which is one of the reasons why I like to put the siding on top of this instead of just cutting the piece from the siding. And that's because if they tear this by accident, then you have that second reinforcing piece on top of it. Likewise, when you cut the siding, sometimes you make mistakes and the siding separates, but then you just glue it down and it looks like a place on a building where the siding is naturally coming up. You know, it actually takes on a very natural building part design. And as it cuts these last little pieces, you find that it works very much quicker. So I'm going to let it cut these last two pieces, and then I'm going to go ahead and hop over and once I get these cut, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop the 3D printer, even though the parts aren't completed, and I'm going to show you how we process them, if that's all right. Is that amenable to everybody?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
That way.
Hey, Jay, one question.
Yes.
So what you're printing out there, that's .020 styrene?
In this case, this is .030.
Oh, 30, okay.
This is .030. Although I use all of them. I use .020, I use .030, I use I sometimes use .015, depending on what I'm doing. You know, if I need really fine detail parts, or like if I'm gonna put a pattern on, trying to think of a place. Oh, bridge. I did a bridge, and I wanted to put the secondary reinforcements on the bridge underneath the vertical supports. So I cut that out of .015 and then put vertical supports on that. Okay, here you go. And so here are those. Let me grab the side. Here's a good one. This is the this is the 6-inch siding that I created. I'm going to snap out here. Come on, there you go. I'm going to snap this out real quick. And one of the great things about this is because the windows line up with where there's the transition from the 6-inch horizontal siding to the 12-inch vertical siding, I'm giving myself a little extra wiggle room. There we go. So in this case, there's the 6-inch siding for the upper portion, which I then overlay over this portion, and I've got the siding. The part that it's cutting now, the 12-inch vertical siding, I simply lay underneath it, and I've got all the parts. In fact, I have, give me a second. I'm gonna. This one in CA is going to be just fine. In the time that took me to say and do, forgive me, the last set of parts finally got finished. on the the 12-inch siding, vertical siding. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to snap out those. There's the right. And again, you'll note as I cut that, I accidentally folded, but since I'm supporting it against this, there's a little excess. I'm going to CA this in real quick so you can see. Not normally a CA guy, but this is very quick and rough, but you see how I've got the two different sidings now.
Oh, neat.
With room for that there. And that's how I do that. Sorry to do it quick and very dirty. That is terrible. But this won't be going on any layout. This is just for display. Before I put it away, does anybody have any questions about the 2D cutter, the Cricut? Okay, then let me go ahead and go over to the 3D printer. Trying to clean up as I go along here. Nothing worse than getting in trouble for making the house dirty, right? So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and stop where I am. It's going to say confirm, and I'm going to confirm. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull this straight up. What you're going to notice is as it pulls up that there is oh, come on. Of all the mornings. Every once in a while, this thing decides to be a little ornery, or it has, and so today is no exception. So as I lift this off, you'll notice that it's drizzling out resin. You do want to be very careful with this stuff. It can burn your skin. It's not a serious burn. It's not a hospital burn, but it's not pleasant. Here's the windows that I cut. Notice they were going to be 12 light windows. And so what I'm going to do now is I've got to get these cut off of here, and I've got to remove the excess resin. Okay? And so what I do for that is that I actually use, the system came with a plastic spatula that, to be completely honest, I found not useful. Okay. Now, as I take them off, we're going to want to make sure that I am cleaning them up. So I'm going to take my glass beaker here, and I'm going to use denatured alcohol to get the excess resin off. And you're going to see why here in a minute. So I'm only going to use a little bit. I'm going to make sure that I get in there and stir it up. You're not really going to be able to use this denatured alcohol again because you're going to have excess resin in it, and it's kind of a neat little project to show why that is. but I'm going to take these. Let's see, you can see it there. And I'm going to pop this lid off. And I'm just going to gently get under and lift them off into this alcohol to get the excess resin off. Now, the resin is, you don't want to drink it, you don't want to eat it. It can burn your skin, and should you be a person who has sensitive skin, or you're somebody who might have a habit of scratching sensitive places, I would wear gloves. I find that gloves get in the way for me when I'm doing this, and I don't scratch sensitive places, so, but get it. By the way, obviously, I didn't make just one. This is one of the things that people make a mistake about when they're doing 3D printing, is they're like, oh, I'll just make one because it'll go faster. No, it doesn't go faster because this has got to move up and down a set number of speed. So whether you put just one item on this or you fill it out, it's going to take the same amount of time. And so in this case, that is, somebody was asking the exact size. That's the exact size my hand in repose. We're gonna give this a little swish. You're gonna notice that the alcohol is turning a little black. That's our way to get it clean, the first level. Then, to make sure that everything gets clean, I like to use a little ultrasonic cleaner. I picked this up on eBay or Amazon for $20, I want to say. Certainly wasn't expensive. So I'm going to take them and just pop them in real quick.
Jay, is that essentially a jewelry cleaner?
It's exactly what it is. It's a,
Okay.
It's a, you know, it's a ultrasonic cleaner, except you buy the one on Micromark and it's what, $200? And then I bought this one off eBay, on not eBay, Amazon, and it was $20.
Harbor Freight carries them as well. I don't remember the price, but they're pretty inexpensive.
Yeah. So, and I just let it run through. Now, I'm gonna.
Just out of curiosity, have you experimented putting those directly in electronically cleaners opposed to going through the denatured alcohol step?
Instead of putting it straight into the cleaner, I have. So what happens is we need something to dissolve off what's there. This is what has come out. And by the way, that's not complete, obviously. But you see there's those very thin little connectors here that hold it to it. But the problem ends up being, as I pop it off, forgive me, that this plastic, yeah, see, and this happened to this one as I did it. This plastic, when it comes off, is actually very flexible and a little bit brittle, okay? So we have to take another step to make it usable. There's a good example of its flexibility at this stage. Okay, and that's not useful for us. It's also very soft, so that you could etch something into it, or I guess you could turn it into a positive if you wanted to add details like scarring up a car. So what we do, once we've I'm going to turn it down here. Once we've ultrasonic cleaned, you know what, I bet I could do this. How's that? Besides my belly. Can everybody see that? My next step with this has to be that I UV cure it a little further. Now I know we've been shining a UV light on it in the machine, but that doesn't set it completely. So what we end up having to use, in this case, I use this is a nail setting light. Light they use to set ladies' acrylic nails. And so I set the light over there. It actually has a timer on top of it, so it'll let me set them. If I just let them set here as they are, you'll actually find that as they go, they're going to curl, starting to curl up a little bit there already. And that's because the resin, it's still flexible. And so what I do is as it goes, I will flip them about 45 seconds in. Yeah, there's 5 more
That's
seconds.
an ultraviolet light.
It's an ultraviolet light, yes. So, I'm going to flip them over and cure the backside. If it was a highly detailed part, what I'll go ahead and do is I'll reset them and recure them after I cut the backing off. But you got to go through this step. This is one of those things that if you don't do, your parts will not be useful. They're just too soft. And I will say again, these resins that I use are the inexpensive basic resin. Oh, there are many other resins that are much more, much hardier, that take much more punishment than these.
Can you salvage the resin that you didn't use up already?
You can, I have not yet. I will show you that. I will do that here in a sec. I want to separate this one off and show you. That's sort of my last step. Yeah, no, it's gonna give me grief there. But this is how thin that part is, which in this case works out to be, since they're the same thickness as the separation panes in this light, the 6 lights of this upper window, that is 1 HO scale inch thick. And they are actually made to scale. When I print them for my own use, I end up with these that actually have a gap in them. I don't know if you can see that terribly well, but that little gap there lets me put an actual sheet of glass in there. There you go. So and actually the great thing about it is, because of the way I do them, they're 2 completely separate sheets of glass, so you can see the difference between the upper sash and the lower sash. So when you get done with this, because the resin is expensive, forgive the camera, doing a Tokyo scene during an earthquake here. Once you're done with the resin, you got two things you need to do. First thing will be to get the resin out of the tray so you can reuse it. And in this case, I have these paper filters that have a very fine micron mask on them, because occasionally you will get pieces that break off and fall into the vat. So we pop this off, we put the funnel in, pull this up against. And my tray has a little notch here set where it's automatically designed to follow the pour. I'm gonna unfortunately have to set you back down here because I don't want to mess this up. Because otherwise I'm gonna be in real trouble. So we pour that back in there. It filters out all the gunk, and then I just wipe that clean plastic down. Clean it with just a dab of cleaner. Now, by the way, what I put in the ultrasonic cleaner is purple power, but you could put pine sol, you could put anything that has a mild degreaser to it works fine. In fact, I find that they work better than putting alcohol in there. The alcohol doesn't quite get everything. It lacks the detergent quality that you need. And finally, the one little piece of bad news. Your alcohol that you use to clean everything up with, you really cannot use it again. I know it looks like you could recycle it. This alcohol doesn't look, I mean, it looks a little cloudy, but it doesn't look bad. But you'll find that when we shine the light on it, pretty quickly we get a cloudiness in it, because the resin that's in there from where we cleaned it will start solidifying. It'll form these interesting little clouds. Oh, looks like maybe I didn't get so much in there today. Oh, there we go. I don't know if you can see that terribly well. Do you see that cloud forming on the surface? Those white particles, that's the resin in the liquid coming out of solution. That's the UV light making them harden. You can't dispose of this like you would normal things. You need to do as much of this, let this set out in sunlight, and then let the alcohol evaporate off, and then go back and dispose of it properly, because it does get into watersheds and cause trouble. And we live in a place with, we like our watersheds. So that's the whole process. I hope it wasn't too boring. Does anybody have any questions now?
Very good presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry it had its dead moments there. So, Jim, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I think we're there. Does anybody else have anything?
Yeah,
they
this Phil, what was the price point on the 2D printer?
2D printer is about $250. They have a new one now that's $400, but the new machine will take X-Acto blades.
Okay. Oh, neat.
Yeah, so I think they're both useful. I think the 3D printer is more trouble, but I think the detail of what you get out of the 3D printer can't be argued with.
Are you open for a private conversation on projects that we're working on?
I'm not opposed to it. I will say I got a list of people. Kelly, I know we've got a project we're working on. I am a much bigger fan of guiding people through helping them do their own projects. So yes, okay. but absolutely, if you have a project you're interested in, or you're interested in getting one of these and want some help in doing things, I'm certainly open to help people.
I'm probably about 6 months down the road after my knee surgery. We'll do that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It sounds like knee surgery recovery time is be the perfect time to have a project to work on.
Yeah, we're going to see how things go with that. You're absolutely right.
Having had both knees done, I think you're going to be dedicated more to healing from that.
Yes.
And working on projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions?
No, thank you, JC, for doing
okay.
Thank you. It's a great clinic. Great clinic.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Okay, folks, if you need anything, feel free to email me. It's jaycello@yahoo.com.
Could you repeat that?
Yes, jaycello, jcello@yahoo.com. Can you guess what I played when I played professionally?
trombone.
Tuba, right, exactly.
Thank you very much, Dave. It was a very fascinating clinic.
No problem. Thank y'all. Jim, do you have a
clinic?
What?
Nice shirt. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, my grandmother would be proud.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Okay, guys, if there's no more questions, we really appreciate it, Jay, that you took the time to put all that together. It came across well. I think everybody learned something and enjoyed it. So again, thank you on behalf of the whole group.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
evening.
Jay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
All right. Take care.
I'll sign off as everybody leaves.
Well, I guess that's my cue to leave. Talk to you later, Jim.
Okay. Okay, that's the majority, so I'm going to end the recording session.
Hi, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.